Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso, and we just wrapped up our interview with Joe Evangelisti, who is a podcast host of the Legacy Blueprint. He's also a high-performance coach that focuses on real estate investors, business owners, and business professionals. He's got over 5,000 hours of business coaching under his belt. And what he talked about today was the 5 freedoms that most people are going after. 1 being financial, 2 is time, 3 is purpose, 4 relationships, and 5 is geography. Anthony, what is the takeaway you had today?
Well, I had a lot. I really enjoyed listening to him. And when he talks about, oftentimes people focus on one.
Yeah.
Right. And it's typically about money. But really, there's a lot more to life than about money. We want those relationships. We want that time with the loved ones, time to do the things that we want. So I appreciated that he wasn't just so focused on the dollars. And one of the many things that stuck to me was something I actually say this sometimes to my wife. She goes, "Well, what did you do today?" I'm like, "Well, I was a firefighter. I was just putting out all of these fires. I had these things that I had planned to do today, but some other things came up, so I had to address those." And what Joe had said, oftentimes we're like an arsonist, like in the corner, setting these fires that we will eventually have to put out. So that really got me to thinking, maybe there's some ways that maybe we could spend a little time, work on some systems or processes so those fires will not be continuing. He also talked about having tribes, right? There's that tribe that's going to lift you up, that's going to that believes in you and going to support you. Then there's that other tribe that's doing the opposite, right? I think we all have those in our lives when we're trying to accomplish something that's different. We always have those people there. "Oh, you can't do that." So he talks about some ways to overcome that. So I really enjoyed it. Cameron, what were some of the takeaways that you had?
Well, to that is, I'm not sure what tribe I fall in for you, is because I beat you down quite often, right? Just keep you humble.
Yeah.
Anyways, is the I got lost there.
It's okay. You just had a bad joke. It happens all the time. So I thought you'd be used to it by now.
No. What my takeaway from Joe was, again, often we always talk about the financial and the time, right? Really, the financial freedom leads to time freedom, and that's what a lot of people are going after. And oftentimes when you meet with somebody that has gotten there and has been very successful in whatever industry that they're in, is they're not happy. And the reason that they're not happy is because of those other 5 freedoms. Is oftentimes the success that they've gotten has came as a sacrifice to a lot of the other areas, especially relationships. And so I think this is going to be a useful interview for a lot of our listeners, is because we do have a lot of successful people on here, but oftentimes we've got some of those issues that maybe we want to address. We just weren't quite sure how. And so Joe and his book are great resources for those of you that are struggling there.
Enjoy this episode.
Take care. Joe, we are excited to have you here. Anthony and I have been talking about you for a little bit, but man, let's get started. I'm excited. You just wrote a book earlier this year that was released, and it's called Multiplicity: How to Unlock the 5 Freedoms and Create Unlimited Abundance in Every Part of Your Life. If you could, man, take a couple minutes, introduce us to the book, and maybe touch on some of those 5 freedoms for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on again, guys. I appreciate it, by the way. The book, I really wrote the book for a couple different reasons. Number one is one of those things that, I've been working on and practicing for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And so I wrote the book actually for my team, for my executive team. I wanted to kind of pass on the message to them. And as I was starting to develop this book, my publisher was like, "Dude, this is a book. You have to write this. Don't give it to your team, give it to everybody." And so it's kind of how it became. It went from almost like an SOP to a book, for the masses. So kind of excited to finally get it out there. But it starts out like this. Everybody knows what 2 freedoms, right? They know financial freedom and they know time freedom.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the 2 things that everybody's chasing. But the reality of it, guys, is there's really 5 freedoms. There's There's those two. Then there's freedom of purpose, which most people don't really think about chasing, right? But when you ask yourself this question, and I ask this question often, and I had a coach of mine years ago ask me this question, I couldn't answer it. And he says, "What do you want?" Simple question, right? Looks me dead in the eyes. He says, "What do you want?" Right? And like a school kid, I like giggled. I was like,
That's what Anthony does.
Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do I want? And he's like, well, it's not a complex question. What do you want? Right. And here I am at that point with multiple companies, definition of, successful, most people's definition of successful, right? I had money, I had people around me, I had a great family and health, life, the whole thing. Right. And I can't answer what I want. Right. And so this freedom of purpose is like really understanding what it is that you want and going after it, right? Without apology, right? Without reservation, without worrying about what other people think, right? And here's one of those facts is that two things are going to happen when you finally believe in yourself and decide to go after what you want. You're either going to have a tribe of people who support you and want to see you succeed and believe in your crazy dream. And they're like, "Cameron, dude, let's go." Right?
Yeah.
I'm taking you. Or what happens, the second thing that happens is we start to rationalize or tell ourselves rational lies about how big our dream is. And we start to say, "Man, I'm not sure if I'm capable of that dream. I'm not sure if I'm willing to do what it takes to get to that dream." And you will also find, when you start to second guess yourself, a tribe of second guessers will show up, right? And they will say, they will immediately, support your second guessing, your rational lies. And they will say, "You know what, that dream was crazy anyway." Right? Maybe you shouldn't have took that risk. That wasn't really worth it, right? So freedom of purpose, gents, is really understanding what it is that you really want and without any apology going after it, right? And finding that tribe of people that are going to support your purpose. Right? Just getting it. Right. Then, of course, we have freedom of relationships, which, kind of goes along with this, right? We all have the ability to hang around and be with people that we want to be with, and ultimately, hopefully, support our dreams and vice versa. Right. I don't know about you guys, but I want to be around people that support me. And I want to be around people who have big enough dreams that I want to support.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to build that tribe. And so many people, it's so unfortunate. You see this happen all the time. They continue to hang around people that bring them down, that keep them mediocre, that keep them conforming to standards that they are way better than, but they do it anyway, right? Guess what? We have a freedom to decide who we spend time with. And yet too many people don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's freedom of relationships. And last but not least, 2021, right, as we're recording this, getting ready to be 2022, we have freedom of geography, right? We have the ability to expand. We can be and do whatever we want to do at any time, right? Most of us can work from most different places. Most of us can at least travel and expand our mindset and see and do new things. And so we have the ability to do these things. And what happens when you guys, I don't know about you, but anytime I go away on a big business trip or I expand my horizons or I go to some beautiful place, right? I end up making more money. I end up creating new businesses. I end up having new experiences that I'm like, wow, right? You ever go to like a really big city? Like I live near New York. I'll walk through New York and I feel like I feel like a gnat, right? And I start to say to myself, man, all the crazy stuff that I've built, I'm nothing, right? I'm in this, mass expanse, right? So geography and traveling and experiencing new things allows our mind to expand and allows us to reset our switch and create new opportunity in our subconscious, which is where it's most important, because that's what really starts to trigger the new stories and the new identities and the new ideas that make us creators, right? That make us the visionaries that we are. So that freedom of geography is the fifth one. And so these are all important pieces of the puzzle, right? We all focus on money and time, but all five of these are super important, as you guys can see.
Which one was most important to you, or which maybe most profound? I mean, financial and time, right? I mean, we talk about financial a lot, right? And that those are two synonymous, right? They're very closely associated, but I don't know if it's those two for you or some of the other ones that you look back over your life and like, man, you know what? That one hits home.
I think that at any given time, we're always evolving, right? As
Yeah.
human beings, we're constantly evolving, right? So I think that these freedoms are also constantly becoming, the most important thing, right? There's always one that pops up. I think time is generally at the top of that list for me, because you don't get time back,
Yeah.
right? Like I know you guys. I think both of you have kids, right? We talked about this last time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
My daughters just turned 9 and 12 last week,
Mm.
right? I'm not having more kids. Like that means I will never have an 8-year-old again. Right. And for me, like I reflect back on that and I'm a sensitive dude sometimes. Like that makes me want to cry. Right. Like there is no 8-year-old in my life ever again. Not maybe my grandkids, but my kids, I will never see my kids learn to walk. Right. I'll never see my kids learn to ride a bike again. I'll never see my kids third grade Halloween trick or treating. Right. Like you're not getting time back. Right. Money, like you guys know, you teach money, right? Like you can lose money and get it back. Money
Yeah.
it comes and goes, right? Time does not come back. You're not getting 5 minutes back with a loved one that you lost. You're never getting that time back. So I think time freedom is so impactful because we have to learn, which we're going to teach in a minute, is controlling the clock. You have to learn to utilize the time that you have to the maximum ability. And look, we all fail at that sometimes, but the more that you can that you can do it right, the more you're going to squeeze the juice out of the time we have.
Now you talk. I love the idea of you when you're talking about once you know your purpose. You know what I'm feeling is you probably have to actively find that tribe that's going to support you, because maybe you might not be in that at that point, but you're probably more associated with the tribe that might be saying, no, those goals are too big. You can't do that. So what are some, and probably a lot of that's is probably family, and it's not like you can, I mean, you still got this, they're your family, right? It's not like some friends where you can just stop hanging around friends. But so what are some things somebody could do as if they're kind of their inner circle is kind of like the wrong tribe?
Yeah, you're almost like taking me down our 5 roads to victory already. So it's like a perfect transition, right?
Okay.
So the number one thing that I see that people lack, and I call it expanse, right? We have to expand, is we have to start thinking differently, right? And we've all read The Magic of Thinking Big. I hope we have. And if we haven't, then definitely go back and read that for your listeners that haven't read that yet. But we have to expand our mindset. That's number one, right? Because most people, when they set out to do something different, they think I'm not good enough, right? I'm not capable. I don't have the education. I don't have the background. I'm not in good enough shape to compete at that level, right? And so we give ourselves these limiting beliefs or these limiting mindsets that hold us stuck in the place that we're at, and they actually keep us from making what we call paradigm shifts or moving to that next level, creating that next opportunity, right? So we have to open ourselves up to expand. And I touched on this already, but what happens is our subconscious is not built for us to expand or have success, right? Our subconscious is actually built to keep us safe, right? So I don't know where you guys like have your best ideas, but I have them usually when I'm driving or when I'm in the shower, right?
Yeah.
You ever have those like aha moments where you're like, all right, I got it. I'm going to tackle the world. This is it. This is the thing, right? And you get all excited. And then immediately what happens generally is you start having these voices in your mind,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, oh, that was a great idea, but man, where am I going to get the money for that? Or man, my wife's going to think I'm crazy. Or I don't know if my team's going to be able to support this. Or where am I going to find the extra time to do this thing, right? And that's our mind rationalizing the idea. And if we break that word down to the two, like I just said, we're telling ourselves rational lies about why it is that we can't go out and do this great big thing, this next level idea, this next thing, right? And so when I start working with a client, like I'm trying to break down what's the obstacle, like what are we trying to overcome, what are the values that you live by, what's keeping you stuck, right? What is that inner voice telling you that's keeping you moving forward? Because we have to eliminate that voice, right? We have to convince that voice that you do want this thing and it is worth pushing past the uncomfortable, right? Sometimes to get to that next level, you got to do some uncomfortable stuff. Let's face it, guys. I mean, you have to take risk in order to get better, right? But when you get to the other side of that paradigm, when you put the work in and it starts to work, right? You're going to create that opportunity. That's the expanse. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what you just said. When you start to convince yourself that what you're doing is the right thing and you're moving in the right direction, the people will follow, right? When you start talking about a good thing, when you put it out there and you say, I'm trying this, I'm trying it, a very small subset of people will immediately cheer you on, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody. Like a lot of people will ignore it, or they'll say you're crazy, or they'll just move past it. But you're going to have your tribe. We all have our tribe. And by the way, it's not family most of the time, right? A lot of time your family is like, are you nuts? Like stay where you're at, man. Be comfortable. Nobody in our family has ever done that before, right? This is not a smart move. Stay in school, right? Right. But you're always going to have that one or two people that will support you no matter what. Use that energy. And then when you start to have a little bit of success and a little bit of success, now all of a sudden the naysayers, I always say the haters are actually secret supporters in disguise, right? They want to see you succeed. The reason they hate on you is because they're secretly willing, they want to see you win because they're afraid to go do it by themselves, right? And then when you win, they're like, oh, dude, how'd you do that? Or, can you teach me? Right. So, it's just because they're afraid to go do it on their own that they're throwing out the shade and they're throwing out the hate. They're just innocent bystanders, and they want to see you succeed so they can figure it out on their own, right? Or they can figure it out through you. So that tribe will start to evolve when your mindset changes and you start to expand.
How does that relate to like business owners? What I was thinking was, right, is man, growing up, right, is I grew up in a small town and kind of thought differently, right? And then had the same ideas, man, I got to get out of here. And really we moved to Vegas and, I didn't know it, but I just thought a little more like a business owner, like an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And so we come down here, but as a business owner, it can be sometimes very isolating, right? Is because you're the guy, right? Or the two guys. And, how do you identify, how do you connect with other people? How do you build that kind of tribe as a business owner?
Listen, again, we have technologies at our fingertips. How do we get connected? Right.
Yeah.
Like it's social media world, man. It's never been easier to get connected than today. I didn't have to fly to Vegas and meet you guys in a bar and be like, yo, you got a podcast, man? Put me on it. Let's go. Right. Like, I mean, it happened all virtually, right? I had a podcast connection and they put me together with you and then I interviewed you. So like things are happening faster than they've ever happened. But yet in some ways they're happening slower than they've ever happened because we put ourselves in our own way a lot of times, right? So it really has to do with taking advantage of the opportunity and not letting yourself be held up by the distractions, right? Knowing when a good thing's in front of you and saying yes, and then knowing when something is an obstacle and saying no, or a distraction and saying no.
I'm excited to have you as a resource because what I would say is, a lot of what we do is I would classify it as counseling. Right. When people come in and talk about money and those things and where they want to get to, that's one of the biggest things that they run into is, hey, this is where I'm at for reality. This is where I want to be. And a lot of it that's holding them back is those limiting beliefs. I've never done this. I've never seen somebody be successful before. How do I overcome this? And now we've got an opportunity. I think we do a decent job of it, but now we've got kind of a professional here. What are some of the resources that, if somebody were to call you, what are you going to walk them through? What are you introducing to, Joe?
Well, again, one of those things that we talk about is actually determining what their value structure looks like, right? How do they think? Because all of us think differently, right? Some of us have that mindset that we're going to go out and tackle it, right? Some of us are constantly naysaying ourselves, right? But you just hit on something really, really interesting, which is the basis of fear, right? Sometimes the basis of fear is based in that not knowing, right? So I don't know the outcome. And if I can't see the outcome, then I'm not going to take any step forward at all. I'm paralyzed in my space, right? And so a lot of not knowing is being able to have a little bit of faith in yourself, right? Or the team around you, understanding that you have some expertise or some professionals around you to say, all right, I'm going to unlock my fear enough to take a step, right? Because remember, when we start taking a step forward, it's like almost like picture a staircase that's dark, right? And you can't see the top of the steps, right? How do you get up the steps? Well, you take one step and then you're on step 2 and then you're on step 3. And then somewhere halfway up the staircase, you start to see the top, right? you didn't just leap 12 steps up the steps, right? You have to take a step. You have to take a step. And so in order to unlock that fear, we have to start to take some steps, right? And some people run steps faster than the others, right? Some people need to take baby steps, but it doesn't matter as long as you're making movement, as long as you're making progress.
Awesome. In the book, you talk a lot about kind of building leaders, right? How do you recommend somebody kind of become a leader? Or what's some of the advice that you have there?
Yeah. So we have a term in my office. We have great leaders create great leaders, right? And it really boils down to how you hold yourself accountable, because people, just like your kids, right? Like going back to the kids again, right? You can tell your kids to do something all day long, right? You can tell your kids, I want you to exercise, but if they don't see you doing it, they're not going to do it, right? It's no different with being a leader. You have to show up. So we talk about standards and rituals, right? How we show up each and every day in our own life, right? Like that, there are times when I don't feel like going to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? But then I'm driven by the fact that I am accountable to my team to be a good leader, right? So if I want my team to believe that I'm a good leader, I have to show up. I have to show up at the gym. I have to show up at my meetings. I have to be prepared. I have to be ready. I have to be present. I have to be proactive at my meetings, right? I have to be ready to go at my meetings. So in order for me to be a good leader, I have to show up and be ready and be present. I expect them to do the same thing. Now, what happens is that becomes infectious, right? When people start to see that the people above them are actually playing above the line, as what we call it, right? And they're doing all the things they say that they want their people underneath of them to do. Well, now all of a sudden, all of us rise, right? You can't be an effective leader just by pointing the finger and saying, you do this, right? You have to lead from the front.
Totally random. I was leaving the park yesterday. My son had a lacrosse game and I was walking through and I heard these two kids arguing. And then one kid was like, yeah, my dad's really fit. And the other kid goes, oh yeah, my dad works out 6 days a week. And I was like, good for him, right? Like again, you're talking about us modeling things for our kids, right? And to be a good leader is you got to show these kids how to do it. One of the things I was going to touch on was you've got young kids, 11 or you said 12 and 8. Is that what you said?
9 and 12. 9 and 12.
9 and 12. My kids are 11, 9, and 7. How have you addressed some of the limiting beliefs that kids kind of are presented with at that age?
So look, people think I'm crazy for this, but I actually coach my kids the same way I coach adults.
Nice.
Right? I actually have coaching sessions with my kids. I will sit down and go through like the foundational tools that I use with my 45-year-old coaching students, I will use with my 12-year-old. Now, I mean, look, there are certain principles that you can't get like deep into with a 9-year-old, but there are also certain things that like if I knew when I was 12 years old, I think about where the heck would I be when I was 20? You know what I mean? So I treat my kids, or I try to anyway, like they're smart enough to understand it, because they are. So we teach them financial tools that I wish I knew when I was 20. I teach them foundational tools from the coaching side of things, like the 6 human needs, and how to baseline their success, and routines and rituals, and obviously taking care of their mind and their body and their mindset and all these things. Like, I mean, I'm teaching them the same things that I would teach, like I said, a client.
I love that. I've started to do that over the last several years. We try to read, we try to stay up on everything, and I'll come across certain ideas and I'll try to share that with my kids. And I'm always surprised at how much they actually comprehend.
Oh, it's amazing.
Right? I mean, my kids are still pretty young, but I'll share certain ideas with them and they pick it up and they'll bring it up, months later with certain things. And so, man, my takeaway over those last several years is that we don't give kids enough credit as far as their comprehension is. We always try to dumb things down to a certain level. And man, I don't know if we necessarily need to do that at times.
I think it's absolutely amazing. You're spot on about their comprehension of things. I mean, my 12-year-old actually, because both my kids get paid a salary, but as you know, they have to have responsibility to get a salary. They can't just get paid a salary and not do something. And my 12-year-old is actually my editor. Right? Her job is to read my books. And And if anyone who's ever read my books knows that my books are written the way I speak, and I curse a lot. So there's a lot of profanity in my books. And my daughter will come back with my book with pen and highlighter all over it, and she's like, "Dad, you curse too much in these books." And then I'll be like, "Okay, what's the biggest takeaway besides that?" And then she'll go into, I thought this or that, I thought that. So she's actually reading the stuff I'm writing, which is super impactful. And I think that it's important for she's not taking every single takeaway in the entire book. I don't expect her to get all of it. But look, if she gets one or two nuggets out of that book, well, then it's important that she read it, right?
And I went through this class this weekend, and what part of it was like practical stuff that you would do.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was really fundamental, and we need to incorporate that somehow into what we do, as far as, because what we're teaching is a little bit different, obviously. But half of the class was you doing it. The second half of it was you coaching your partner.
Yeah.
And man, that I think I learned more on the second half than I did of like stumbling and fumbling through all these steps, was actually watching somebody and then correcting them and saying, "Hey, this is the steps that we have to do." So that coaching piece was fundamental as far as kind of just overseeing it. So, just an idea. We've got to try to incorporate that somehow.
You're really hitting the nail on the head, and you're actually reminding me of a piece that I missed on the last question, which is how do we teach great leaders? And part of the concept of multiplicity that I say at the beginning of the book, the requirement is that you reteach it, right? So all of my leaders end up being coaches inside of the environment, right? Like when I do a weekly mastermind call with all my executives from all my different companies on one call. And whatever I teach them, almost 90% of the time, the homework is reteach it. Reteach it to someone on your team, reteach it to your wife, reteach it to your husband, reteach it to your kids. I don't care. But when you reteach, we all know this, right? You become a better learner by teaching, right? So I teach you something and you might say, okay, well, that was amazing. Okay, great. But now when you go reteach it, right now it starts to really stick because you're understanding the core competency of what you just learned. Now the person you taught it to inevitably is going to have questions. So now you got to put it in your own words. You got to tell the story of what you just learned. And now it's locked. It's locked in there. You only have to reteach it once to really understand it. And so the re-coaching of the coaching stuff is one of the most impactful things about this leadership, downline inside of our organization is if I teach it, now they reteach it.
We always had this mentor that I forget exactly how he'd say it, but essentially it was, "Hey, it's not your job to sit here at the foot of your mentor and just get fat with knowledge, right? It's your job to learn it, turn around and go share it with as many people as you can."
Yeah. I mean, there's a secret to all this stuff, right, guys? Like none of this is, I'm not creating all this stuff from scratch. I might be adding my spin on certain things, but like I'm learning it from 10 years of paying all these different coaches and mentors. It's a culmination of all of their stuff, and they learned it from somebody else, right? My number one coach is a Tony Robbins Platinum Master coach for the last 20 years, right? So a lot of the stuff is Tony's stuff. And then I have other mentors that taught me in real estate. And, so it's a culmination of all of these things compiled. And then when you go reteach it, it's your spin and the things that you've learned. So, all of this, none of it is unique, right? Nobody's sitting there creating this stuff from scratch, right? And that's the magic of it. It's the way you teach it. It's your inflection. It's your stories. It's how you impart it, right? And how it's received.
So let me ask you, we've kind of talked about the book and some of the 5 freedoms and those things. Is who do you typically work with, right? Who's reaching out to you? What's your avatar? What are some of the issues that they're dealing with? I think we touched on some of them, but if you could just revisit those for us.
Yeah, most of my coaching clients are C-suite executives or business owners, and most of them have some sort of component either when they get started with me or before they get started with me in real estate investing, right? Because they're doctors, they're attorneys, they own insurance practices. I have clients that have nationwide contracting firms and things like this, and so they 2 reasons that they generally reach out to me is they want more quality time, they want to learn how to control the clock, or they want to learn how to use their money, right? Find a ways to use it better, right? Build wealth. And so when they come to coach with me, it's they have an understanding or a general understanding of real estate investing, or they don't, and inevitably they become real estate investors. So again, I love working with business owners that are just trying to solve high level obstacles, because most of the time the answer is right under our nose, right? And it comes through questions and research and trying to understand the client, to figure out that hey, you know what, with maybe a couple different hires or with a couple different changes to your systems and processes, you can double your revenue, or double your revenue and cut your time in half, right? There's so many people that are literally working, and this is from my experience, myself doing this. You're working 100 hours a week and you don't need to, right? And it just happens time and time again. So we call this turning decades into days, right? How many people are just working for work's sake, right? Instead of working for quality of work. We call these high gain and high income activities, right? Focusing on the things that are going to get you to where you got to get to. It goes down to Pareto's law, right? 80% of your activities are generally created, or I'm sorry, 20% of your 80% of your revenue is done by 20% of your activities. And so the other 80% of your activities are only generating 20% of your revenue. So sometimes we have to really focus on what's the high income activity that creates for you, and focus on that, and cut out all the other minutia, right? That, people do busy work all the time. I call them firefighters. They're always putting out fires. They're running around putting out fires, and secretly they're behind the building and they're arsonists, right? They're lighting the building on fire so they can put that shit out all day long, right? And they're lighting it, right? And they're putting fires out. And at the end of the day, they pat themselves on the back and they're like, good job, man. You put out fires all day long. But what did you produce, right? What was your income? And you look back and you're like, man, well, I did that one phone call and it was amazing. Well, you should have left it at that. You could have took the rest of the day off, right? And that's the sad truth for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Joe, what I like is that you're talking, not a lot of times there's a lot of coaches, particularly around the real estate arena. It's all about the dollars, right? Want to make more money, but you have a more I don't like the word holistic, but kind of like the big picture, because it's not all about money. Like, how many people do we know who are set financially, but inside they don't have the relationships, they don't have the time, right?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I would bet, I actually would like to go back to the research on this. I would bet 75% of my coaching clients come to me with money because they can't control their time. Right? They have plenty of money and they just can't figure out how to control their clock.
Joe, could you maybe give us a little example of maybe a client who came in with this problem and kind of maybe how you helped solve that problem?
Yeah, I have a young wholesaler real estate investor. For those of you familiar with wholesale real estate, he was nationwide. Like somebody gave him the advice to go nationwide. He had just sporadic all over the place, just terrible advice. I mean, frankly. And so he was trying to run deals all over the country and just blanket market deals all over the place. Now, when he came to me, he had plenty of deals. The problem with doing it that way is that every deal is a new adventure, right? For those of you in real estate that are listening, you totally understand. Like, if you get a deal under contract in Arizona, you're going to have different laws, different logistics, different conversations around the transfer of that deal, right? The attorneys talk differently. The local ordinance is different. The CO process is different. The transfer is different. So now I got a deal in Arizona. Now I got a deal in New Hampshire, and I got a deal in Montana, and I got a deal in California. So every time a new deal comes across the board, my team has to learn how to do that deal from scratch, right? And so he was making decent money, but he was working literally around the clock because he was putting out fires all day, every day, trying to get to the closing table. Okay. Now, this is a guy who has a very young daughter and another one on the way. And when he hired me, he said, man, I'm making great money, but I'm working 120 hours a week. Like, I can't keep up. Like, I'm trying to keep up. And like, every time I solve a problem, there's another problem pops up, and I'm trying to get to closing after closing after closing. And we call this the real estate roller coaster, right? The problem with real estate in general, for a lot of folks, not for everyone, for a lot of folks, is they're so focused on getting to the closing table that they pull their eyes and their attention off the marketing and the sales. And then once they go to closing and they get that big check, they pop their head up and they go, oh, my pipeline's dry. I need to go back to selling and marketing, right? And then they go get some other deals together. And then inevitably something goes to contract and they focus on closing again. So they might have this massive month, and then all of a sudden they go to zero for a month. And they have another massive month, they go to zero for a month. So it's this roller coaster effect of closings, right? And so immediately what we did was we took it back to, he had experience in his local market. He'd been there for years. Took it back to a local market, right? Let's go deep before we go wide. Let's forget about being everything to everybody. Let's go back to being everything to my local market. And he had a great experience there. So we doubled down the marketing effort in his local area. And now this has only been 4 months. Now he's literally working from home 3 days a week with his baby and his wife. Another one's going to be due in, I think, January. And he's systematized his income, right? Flattened his income curve, doubled his average income per month, and it's steady, right? I want consistent, predictable income. You'll hear me say this over and over again when I'm working with clients. I want consistent, predictable income. That means that the money comes in every single month, whether I work 100 hours a week or 10 hours a week, or I take a month off, right? I want to know the money's coming. And that's more important to me than having a month like this and then a zero, and then a month like this and a zero. I don't care if you make $1 million a month. If you make a zero the next month, now all of a sudden you're sweating, right? I want to make sure we have consistent, predictable income across the board. And then we can start to grow and then grow and then grow, right? I want a consistency. So now he's making twice as much as he was when we started 4 months ago. And he's working from home more than half the time. So, the goal is to double that.
That sounds like a success to me. It's Joe, you mentioned this, you've used this phrase a few times in an interview so far, is controlling the clock. Can you maybe dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, we're jumping around a little bit, but so that's one of the 5 roads of freedom. That's number 4.
Okay.
And so, what do like the best sports figures in the world do? The best, right? Like, what does Tom Brady do? He's down by 21 in the third quarter, right? You don't see him sitting on the bench, right? And I use this analogy. It was kind of funny because I'm an Eagles fan, season ticket holder, and Tom Brady just came to town last Thursday and whooped our ass. But anyway, he's down by 21.
Glad you're over it. Yep.
Yeah, I'm over it. I'm good now. You don't see him like sitting on the bench sulking, right? Like, he knows I got to make up 21 points. I got 20 minutes left to do it. He knows if I run the ball, I drain the clock. If I throw it deep and they catch it, all right, I'm going to keep the clock moving. He knows exactly how to control the ball and the clock in order to win the game, right? That's what the best sports figures do. Well, guess what? The 3 of us all have the exact same clock. We call it the rule of 168, right? And the rule of 168 says that we all have 168 hours in each week, right? And that's the 3 of us. That's Elon Musk. That's Mark Cuban. That's Oprah Winfrey. That's every major person you've ever looked up to in your life had the same exact 168 hours in each week, right? But the difference being, and by the way, you have to eat, sleep, right? Pay bills, play with your kids. But
do your hair,
right?
Yeah.
You've got great hair, by the way, Anthony.
Yeah.
You got to do your hair. You got to look good. You got to take showers. But then you also have to do what we call high gain activities, and which is taking care of yourself, right? Intensive self-care, right? You have to go to the gym. You have to sweat. You have to take care of your mind. You have to meditate. You have to work on that expansive mindset that we talked about earlier, right? To stay in the game, right? Continually working on your vision and your story and your identity. But then you also have to do the high income activities. And a lot of people miss this part, right? They go to work for work's sake, but they don't focus on the income. Like, what's the point of getting up and going to work if you're not going to get paid, right? I want to focus on what generates income for you. Eliminate everything else. How do you get to the bottom line? What makes you money? What gets you paid? And as a business owner, that should be your only focus. But what do a lot of business owners do? We start thinking about, well, man, it'd be cool if my logo looked a little bit better. I'm going to talk to the designer today. And what cardstock should my business cards be made of? And maybe I should talk to the website guy and see what my website looks like today, right? And we focus on all the minutia, all the bullshit, the stuff that doesn't get us paid because it makes us, again, feel good, right? So what winners do is focus on high income and high gain, right? And so we go to the 4 Ds, right? We can either do what needs to be done right away. Again, high income, high gain. We can delay it, And delay it means using a calendar like an adult, right? If something needs to get done, I put it on my calendar. You guys laugh at this, but I'm telling you right now, I coach people who make $1 million a year and can't use a calendar, right? We delegate it, which comes with its own set of rules, right? We have to learn how to delegate to people that are accountable and responsible. Another piece of leadership, right? We have to teach people how to be accountable and responsible. Or last but not least, and doesn't happen enough, we dump it, right? There's so many things, guys, that we don't have to do, right? But we do them anyway, right? We feel obligated. We feel responsible. This guy asked me to get coffee with him, so I feel like I have to show up for it, right? Or somebody asked me for a favor or whatever, right? How much of your time is spent, right? I just told you I went to a football game. I have season tickets. I might go to 2 football games a year, right? Because I don't want to spend 10% of my week at a football game, right? My stuff's too important.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend it with my kids, frankly. Right. So, again, where are we focused our time? Because too many Americans, unfortunately, are binge watching Netflix, right? Are finding ways to avoid the tough stuff. And as you guys know, the people who are really moving the needle in their life, they're spending their nights and weekends moving the needle.
Yeah.
Right. They're constantly thinking about what's going to push the needle forward for me. And that's what makes the difference in the 168.
Awesome. I love that. Joe, if somebody's listening and they wanted to get a hold of you, where's the best place to find you? Yeah,
so I appreciate you asking that. We offer what we call a triage call for, again, these business owners, real estate investors and such. We call it a triage call because my team will actually hop on a 15-minute call with anyone who wants to get a hold of us, and we will learn about your obstacles. First of all, I take the call most of the time just because I love to talk to people and meet them and figure out what kind of walk of life you're from and see if I can help. But we'll figure out what kind of obstacles you're dealing with and figure out if it's something we can help you with. 9 times out of 10, we can. But if we can't, we're just honest with you. We tell you we can't. And then if coaching is something that is in alignment with you and it's something that's going to help you get to the next level, we have that conversation too. But it's not a sales call at all. We're just there to serve you and try to help you, again, eliminate some obstacles. But they can go to legacybuilder.coach. And again, we have an opt-in scheduler there, and they can schedule a call with us.
Awesome. We'll be sure to have that link in the notes. But guys, go check out that website. There's some really, really good testimonials on that page. But Joe, thanks a ton, man. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.